Well, my goodness, folks, we have officially done it. We've made it to the end of the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. 10 episodes this season. And I think I can safely say a couple of things. This is some of my favorite Star Trek to come out in decades. This is my favorite new series of the year. It might actually be my favorite series of the year. When I'm looking back at everything so far, we're only in July. When I look back at everything we've seen so far, this one, I think, really stuck with me. I think it's genuinely the most interesting, the most fun, and the most awe-inspiring. And the time of this recording, I've just come out of seeing a big blockbuster film that, well, didn't bode a lot of confidence for me for a franchise. But then I look at this episode of television, and things actually happened in it that really made me happy. And I'm like, why am I not getting this feeling anywhere else? And I think it's because this show is balancing so many more things than other TV is. And it's such a singular vision where it's not trying to be like for everyone. It's like we know who our audience is. If we try to make a story that's going to please every single person, we are going to alienate the people who are actually here to see what we have to say. So we're going to tell a really interesting story in this final episode of this season. We're focusing on Pike again, kind of bringing it full circle. He is trying to find a way to prevent the death of himself and these other kids that are involved in this thing. When they go to the neutral zone, they get involved with this man, and his son is one of the victims that's going to end up getting injured when Pike eventually dies. And you're like, okay, interesting. How are we going to figure out that situation? So Pike's initial reaction is, I am going to write this kid a letter, Doc Brown and Marty style, where he's like, don't be here at this time. And as he's writing the letter, or dictating it, I should say, he's not writing it. Can people write in Star Trek, or do they just type everything away? That's a whole other topic for another day. As they are doing that, a future version of Pike comes back to this reality. He's like, dude, you did it. It worked, but the world literally fell apart. I just want to say this. I don't know what they are doing with the prosthetics on this show, but there is nothing like it. It is the best prosthetics I've seen in a long time on anything, and the subtlety in the aged up Anson Mount, because look, the guy looks beautiful at any age, but just the subtle ways the wrinkles are added, the face is kind of dragging. It's very interesting, and it looks incredibly well. So here's the quandary of the episode. Pike wants to protect himself and the kids from being killed. If he does that, something bad happens. So what happens to that we see that makes that, well, the understanding of this episode? Oh, of course, we have to go to the future to find that out. So we jump ahead 7 years into the future. Oh, it's one of those episodes. And you know what? This went in directions I wasn't expecting. First off, I could be completely off base here. But the thing we are seeing is, this is an episode of the original series. This is very much either inspired or directly an interpretation of Balance of Terror, which is an episode where Kirk goes against a Romulan ship and they're trying to figure out each other's tactics. They literally say lines from that episode in here, which makes me like, yeah, you are clearly homaging that episode. So in this reality, the event that would have killed Pike and these kids happened 6 months ago. He survived and the kids survived. And what happens is they are now still in the Enterprise, but headed to this neutral zone where there's this Romulan ship. And what ensues is the conflict between the Enterprise and this Romulan ship. And basically you are seeing this version of Pike trying to figure out, how do I play into the hand and tell myself that this is what needs to happen? What am I really going to be a part of? He tells Spock that he's from the future. Spock's like, yo, okay, that's something I'll have to deal with now, which is very interesting. And I'm really digging it. I think what this episode really did was just like, okay, here's our problem. Here's how we're going to fix it. Here's how we're going to deal with it. The spaceships look fantastic. The idea of the Romulans was so interesting in here. But folks, it's not just about that. It's not just about that, because this episode finally debuts a character I really think they should have held off on revealing, but I get why they didn't. Scotty, of course, no, I'm just kidding. Scotty is revealed, though. We do not have an actor for him yet, but Scotty is in this episode. Or just a man with a Scottish accent yelling at Spock while they're fixing some stuff after they got attacked. That's it. But no, folks. Making his debut to the Strange New Worlds mythology is none other than James T. Kirk, played by Paul Wesley. Now let's talk about Paul Wesley's Kirk for a second, because you have to. It's the most prominent character in Star Trek. Everybody knows Kirk. How does Paul hold up in this role? Interesting. The thing is, he is just not Shatner or Pine. There is something about him that just doesn't have that physicality or that look. And I think it's just like he might be just too skinny, too lanky looking. He's got a very like Jim Carrey face where there's so much expression in that and not like a stoic energy. It's just very, here we go. That kind of like grizzling your cheeks and your chin intensity, not like the stoic nature of a Shatner or of a Pine. And you're like, okay, can he pull off the suave, kind of brooding, smug nature? Little bit. There's some moments where it's peeking through. It's like you're seeing this guy do all of the things Kirk should do. He's acting like Kirk. He is saying what Kirk would say, but you just don't feel the machismo or the charisma beaming off of him that you've seen with the other interpretations of Kirk. That's not a problem. If we see more of this character, I am sure we're going to build up to that, but we'll have to wait and see. We are introduced to him because he's the only Federation ship nearby to help us out in the Romulan situation. It's also the ship that Leon went to when she stepped away from the Enterprise. That's where she went. And you see, there's a really interesting moment where Pike actually talks to Sam Kirk, his brother. He's like, what's up with your bro? Like, is he a good guy? Should we trust him? He's like, well, he's a little rough around the edges, but he's fairly good. And I'm like, okay, is he? The Kirk we are seeing here, the James Kirk, is an interesting one, to say the least. He's doing things by the book, but also being his own man. I'm not sold on him yet, but as we get further into this, we will talk about it. So there's two opposing forces kind of coming up here. Actually, there's a few, because again, it's that thing is like, no one has made contact with the Romulans in a century. How are we going to handle that situation? How are we going to play it out and figure that out? Ortega's like, they're the bad guys, let's kill them. But Pike's like, we are diplomats, we are good people. We're going to try a thing. As we stalk them, because both of our ships are kind of damaged, we're going to figure out a situation here. Pike's big plan is we are going to do a Hail Mary. We're going to call out to them, do like, hey guys, look, this is scary, this sucks, we're both damaged ships. I'm just calling a ceasefire, nobody has to hurt anybody. All we can do is build our ships back up, get back to the standard that we have for each other, 2 hours tops, and this situation where we have like a truce is the first step in maybe some larger peace talks. And the captain of the Romulus ship is like, yeah, I'm on board for that. Very much that Balance of Terror style. And I'm like, okay. I really like what that's doing there. Nobody's really agreeing with Pike. Nobody's really agreeing with the Romulus commander. I like the way those are playing off each other. And again, he's like, in another life, we could have been friends when later events happen. It is so much Balance of Terror. I really like it. My favorite part of the episode, I cannot believe this happened. It was so cool to see this. Just when we reveal the Romulans, when we just reveal them for the first time in this universe, everybody sees them on screen, and you have the beautiful zoom shots just zooming into everybody, and it just starts at like the front of the bridge and just pushes into Spock, because of course the Romulans look like an offset of Vulcan. It pushes in on Spock, and Ethan Peck gives a beautiful just eyebrow raise, and I lost my mind at that, because I'm like, oh, that is subtle. You are just pulling back when you are pushing forward in the camera. I'm like, that is brilliant. That is brilliant filmmaking. I'm just impressed by that. But the thing that happens, as you see Pike and the commander, they're like, yeah, we're fine with this. Well, other people aboard those ships might not be okay with the idea. The commander of the Romulus ship has a little underling who's like, just in case, I'm going to call for backup in case something bad happens. And Kirk's like, I like your idea there, Pike, but I'm just going to stink away for a bit and get some ships that look like they might be our armada. Okay, sound good? Like, that's a Kirk thing to do, but he wasn't really, like the, hey, let's do it. It's just more like the, that is what we're doing. Okay. And I'm like, oh, there's something there that is interesting, but I don't know if it's being presented perfectly. And I'm like, okay, I think Paul will find his footing. I have no doubts he will be returning to the second season. They wrapped filming, and the end of the episode, you see when we go back to the present timeline that Pike is looking at recruiting Kirk for the ship. I'm like, that's kind of cool. I do dig that. So now you got these two guys who clearly don't want to go to war, working with these people that do want to go to war, and the Romulus birds of prey kind of start attacking them. And yeah, it ensues into a really nice looking space battle. And the thing I like about it is, like, it is slow. It is not like, oh, we're shooting around like bloop, bloop, bloop all over the place. It's like these are ships in a located spot, just maneuvering slowly around each other, trying to avoid hits. It looked really cool. Oh, it looked cool. I really dug that. And it's a ship that had the commanders kind of like sent out to Fry, and the Romulans actually killed that ship because they think it's trying to stop a ceasefire. And you're like, whoa, that's crazy. I cannot believe how good this episode works. Again, I completely understand reinstating the Balance of Terror storyline for a modern audience, and those of us who are Trekkies, we know that story where it's like you don't truly know your enemy. Maybe the thing that you think you've been fighting for this whole time isn't actually what you've been told you're fighting for, and you're trying to do this in a diplomatic way, but tradition or other people aren't seeing it the way you are, where you're coming at it from a neutral perspective, in a neutral zone, I should say, and suddenly you have this conflict that's rising. And in that case, sometimes things are going to get lost in the fray. Such is the case with this Romulan ship, such is the case with the peace treaties, because Pike acted on his instinct to try to be the good guy and figure out the peace. It starts the Romulan and Federation fight that spans years, literal years, and in the future you see Pike's like, I'm working with the Klingons. This got weird. Millions of lives were lost, all because you didn't want to die. That is insane. Like, could you imagine that alone? Great Star Trek. But could you just imagine being that situation where, like, I want to save the lives of these kids and myself, but at the cost of doing that, millions of people are going to die because I am now the lead in this situation that I shouldn't be the lead of, which leads me to think this is actually Balance of Terror, but because Pike wasn't injured in that timeline, Kirk isn't there to step in and do the thing Kirk would do to stop what's happening there. What? That is just such a cool idea, such a fun concept to play with, and I genuinely, wholeheartedly think there's nothing else like it. Like, this was just solely Star Trek, and this is the kind of story only Star Trek can present in such a positive way. It's so intense and gripping, and you're just blown away at every turn by it. Like, the way that people on both sides of the ship, the Romulan ship and the Federation ship, are like, we should kill them. But these two men are like, no, we don't need to. But doing that, but Pike's changing the course of history so he lives, it causes a lot of people to die. So when he returns to the present with this newfound identity to his name, he kind of accepts his fate with a little more tolerance. And I'm like, that is something really positive. It's taken this dark idea, but it's spinning it in a very positive light. And I think that is a really powerful thing to see. Really intense for the show, but it doesn't end there because we know we're getting a second season. We have to end on a bit of a cliffhanger. Una Chin Riley gets found out for being an Eltharian, the people from episode 3. She gets taken in by Pike's little lady friend, the one he's been kissing since episode 1. And you're like, okay, oh, here we go. Setting up a second season with a potential Kirk, with a potential Scotty. I'm still impressed with how restrained they are. Not giving us all the rest of the cast. We got Chapel, we got Uhura, we got Spock. We don't need to have Bones show up yet. We don't need to have them all just randomly appear. We get it. I feel like we're going to start seeing that happen more. But Hemmer is dead, so Scotty makes sense. And Kirk is too big of a name for you to let go. I really like this episode. I think it's a strong story showing you the ideas of war and how they can change for certain perspectives. I think it's a great story to show you the Pike and Spock relationship, where he's essentially, because I didn't do this in a personal way, I lost you. And I think that's a really cool thing. Just the effects they used for Spock's burned up body. Oh, that was cool. That was so dark and weird, and I really dug that. Just like, oh, the Vulcan body so rocky and green. That was really cool. This worked well. This worked really well. I think Kirk still needs a little bit of figuring out, but it's your first attempt. I'm not going to fault you for that. It takes everybody a minute to get into character. So, This episode had some great time travel, some great effects, some great emotion, some great acting, and some bloody good Star Trek. It is a great finale to the season, and I cannot wait to see what is coming for the second one. And you can damn well be sure if I'm still doing this shit, I will be back to talk about the second season of Strange New Worlds. Now, thank you guys for watching this review and all of these reviews. Thank you so much, all of you who comment every time. I appreciate it. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And as always, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck.